God, open up the doors, give me boldness to go through those doors, and then give me clarity when I speak of the gospel and when I should speak and what I should say.
Welcome to the One Cry Podcast, a nationwide call for spiritual awakening. The goal, accelerating the movement of God through sharing revival truth, stories, and reports.
So welcome to the One Cry Podcast. I'm Kyle Reno. This is Bill Elliff. We are humbled, man, to be with you and that you'd give us a little bit of time here to talk about things. Man, this series has been fun.
I'm telling you. Yeah. I'm so encouraged.
Yeah.
It's speaking to me.
Right.
That's
good, isn't it?
People don't realize a lot of times preachers in the middle of a sermon.
Lord, this is confessional.
You all of a sudden you'll think, oh my goodness, God's talking to me right now.
Yeah, right.
Right in the middle of a sermon,
Right. And the other side of that's true. You're like, oh man, I don't know that I'm hearing him right now. I'm in trouble.
That's right. That can be true too.
Yeah,
totally and completely. But Kyle, last week you talked about Acts 4, the disciples really pushing through. They were under persecution. They could have just shut down. Right. But instead, they did the only thing that would have brought about a spectacular result. They prayed and they cried out to the Lord, and it led to a spirit-filled boldness that shook the world. Yeah. And so we want to stay on that same theme in this podcast for just a minute.
Yeah, and there's more. There's more to learn. There's the start of something. And I know this passage in Colossians, Bill, that you're the complementary realities of Scripture and what God's trying to say to us. My encouragement even now to our listeners is that I think the Lord is speaking in our day around boldness for the sake of those that are far from God, but it's a prayer to be prayed. So walk us into it, Bill. Right.
I don't think American Christianity can get really selfish and self-focused, and we spend a lot of time dealing with ourselves, talking about ourselves, wanting to get things for ourselves in terms of the church and everything we're doing. We don't think much about lost people. Right. And we've missed the point, right? Mm-hmm. Everything is about getting us ready to do the one thing that we can do better here than in heaven, and that's tell lost people about Christ. Right. It's fascinating to me. I studied this one time, Kyle. Every time, and there are multiple times that Paul asked somebody to pray for him. You know what he asked for? It wasn't safety. It wasn't money. It wasn't, pray that the government will turn around and so that, I can have a better life. It wasn't that. It was always prayers for boldness and for a strong witness. And one of those it kind of comes out in Colossians 4. Let me just read these 4 verses. He says, devote yourselves to prayer. Now, that word devote means be strong towards. Right. Don't let this be just a kind of a sideways deal, a little flippant thing. I want you to be devoted to this, to prayer, keeping alert in it with an attitude of thanksgiving, praying at the same time for us as well. He's asking for prayers for himself. Now listen to what he asked them to pray for. That God will open up to us a door for the word so that we may speak forth the mystery of Christ, for which I've also been imprisoned, that I may make it clear in the way I ought to speak. And then he says, conduct yourselves with wisdom towards outsiders, making the most of every opportunity, and let your speech always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person. Now, Kyle, if they're able to right now, somebody may want to pull out their phone or a notepad and write down these 5 things. Because these are 5 things to pray for yourself, for your church, for other believers, that would make us a better witness. that would make us better at the task. So I'm just going to mention these 5 things. We can talk about them for a minute. First of all, pray for open doors. Mm-hmm. Open doors. Only God can open doors, and God can open any door. Now, I can come up against a door that I can't get through, but there's no door that God can't open. I mean, history tells us that Paul probably appeared before Caesar. How in the world did this happen? Open door. It was an open door. His time before Agrippa and before Felix, and these were just open doors. God just opening doors, and God can do that. He said, "Pray for us that God will open up to us a door for the Word, not a door for our well-being, but a door that we could go through, so the Word of God could pierce through to people's hearts." So, number one, if you want to be better at this and be in concert with the Lord and His mission and activity, pray for open doors. Secondly, pray for bold speech. He says here in verse 3 that we may speak forth the mystery of Christ, for which I've also been imprisoned. Just everywhere you look, Paul asked to pray for boldness. Now, you got to think about this. Why did this giant, this lion of the faith, pray for boldness? Well, the reason was he didn't have boldness, right? I mean, you don't pray for something you don't need. And apparently, Paul at times was fearful. Paul at times knew, I need a group of people praying that I would be bold and that I would have courage, particularly when I'm faced with opposition. So how do I pray? Lord, open doors for the gospel. Number 2, give me boldness to proclaim forth the mystery of Christ. Number 3, give me clear speech, not only bold speech, but clear speech. Look at verse 4, that I may make it clear, that make it clear in the way I ought to speak. In other words, Lord, I just need clarity. I need to understand what you want me to say, and then I need to speak it with clarity. I heard one time, this is a hysterical story, but one time I have 4 buddies, and we've been accountability partners for 30 years, and we play golf together once or twice a year. And one time our car had broken down, and we got in a cab, and one of the guys was in the front seat, and he was talking to the cab driver, and the 3 of us were in the back. And this guy started sharing Christ with this cab driver, and it was just so clear. And so we were sitting in the back seat, and I thought my job right now is just keep my mouth shut and pray. And I'm praying for the guy in the front who's sharing the gospel. He was doing it so clear. So this guy, I thought, man, any minute, this guy's just going to break down and get saved. He was asking all the right questions. And all of a sudden, another guy in the back seat that just wasn't tuned in, and I will out of grace not tell you his name. I would really like to, and we've ribbed him about it for years. Yeah. He just blurted out in the middle of this gospel conversation, well, yeah, I've just always prayed that God would be my co-pilot or something. It was just the stupidest thing. It was completely not of the Spirit. Right. And that guy kind of looked around and thought, well, what is he talking about? And kind of the moment was lost, Well, I've prayed for that cab driver. Right. And I've ribbed my buddy for 30 years that he probably messed that up because he didn't have clear speech. So how do I pray? God, open up the doors, give me boldness to go through those doors, and then give me clarity when I speak of the gospel and when I should speak and what I should say. And here's a 4th thing, pray for wise conduct. He says in verse 5, conduct yourself with wisdom toward outsiders, making the most of the opportunity. So I think, Kyle, I think what this means about wise conduct is, we can be in the presence of lost people far from God, and we're not even thinking. We're not even thinking about God, open up a door for the gospel, and we may act in certain ways that turn them off, that are just obnoxious or crude or whatever it is, and it really closes the door for the gospel.
Right.
He said, "No, you conduct yourself wisely around outsiders, so that when the opportunity comes, you can make the most of it." And then the final thing he says, and Kyle, wait in here, verse 6, pray for gracious speech. Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned like salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person. There's a little couplet. I studied it one time. It goes all through the Bible. It culminates in Jesus when it says in John 1 that the Lord came and he was full of two things, grace and truth. Some people are full of truth, but they have no grace. No grace. And so it's harsh and judgmental. Some people have grace, but no truth. And so it's kind of sentimental and emotional, but the truth doesn't break through. And the great balance is truth and kindness, as Proverbs said. Truth and grace, like Jesus had. And so he says, look, you need gracious words. We need to be, you're talking to a guy who's far from God. We need to understand where he's coming from, empathize with that, and in grace speak to him, but also with uncompromising truth speak to him. So these 5 things.
That's gold.
Praying for open doors, bold speech, clear speech, wise conduct, and gracious speech.
Right.
I think if we'd start praying that way, it would change what God did through our lives.
Yeah, it would be a prayer that would change somebody's world. I mean, it would literally, God, on the other side of that, God hears. And I would say this, we're not just talking about prayer. We're talking about ways to pray here. Like if you will pray these ways, because Paul did like that. Paul, think about that. That's the, don't skip. This is not just a passage to preach. This is a passage to pray.
And to live.
To 100%. I just watched, you're talking and I didn't think about this until you started sharing. I watched this play out recently in a guy being born again. So for his story testimony sake, I'll keep it a little generic, but his name's Daniel. But Daniel just came to Christ 2 Sundays ago in one of our gatherings. And so here's the open door, like that happened. That opened doors both ways. God opens a door for us to preach, but God may open the door for an unbeliever to enter into and hear the gospel. So for him, he has on February 5th last year, his brother, grown brother, put his name on the cross for us to pray. He was a far from God person. And so we prayed for him till Easter. We prayed every week as a staff for him. But then others have taken those cards, our intercessors, and still praying actively for him. But he's not been in church in 20 plus years, and he lived in Oregon. Just to summarize, in the last 2 months, twice he has had a house burned down, a house and then an apartment.
Wow.
Right. And he's been living very far from God. He told me that he has not been in a church in his adult life, but has not really thought about his relationship with God in over 2 decades. But the situation moved him to the point of desperation where he had to come back to at least get his life balanced a little bit to family in Mississippi. And because his brother and his family have uncompromisingly been bold about his need for Christ, right? Bold, while also still graciously loving him. Like they loved him to the bone. He felt like he could still come back. He felt like he could still come back and be in their presence, and that their, like you said, or that their message about Christ and their manner of life, they matched. And so because of that, he and his girlfriend came back over Christmas time just to have a place to lay their head and sort of recalibrate their life. And they invited them to come to one Sunday gathering. And he walks in and this is off, boy, get me crying. And I said, turn in your Bible to Daniel chapter 10. And I was going to preach a message and when I said Daniel, that's his name. And he said the first time the Spirit of God said he didn't know how to say it. He said, I felt like God said to me, when you said, this is the beginning of the message. He said, when you said, turn to Daniel 10, he said, I heard something say, I know your name.
Wow.
I know your name by literally quote. And then the Lord's presence messes with him all through the service and get to the end. We're doing the blessing. And one of our pastors come to do the blessing and the end and says, hey, this blessing is based out of Isaiah 55, I believe it was. And the guy's name is Daniel Isaiah. So he comes up to me a train wreck. And after sharing the gospel with him, what it means to truly be born again, he's born again. Born again. Brings his wife back his girlfriend, going to be wife, this next week to meet with somebody at our church who she's born again. So I say all that, the 5 things.
All that converging. Yeah.
All that convergence. They've been bold. They've been gracious. Their conduct has been over 2 decades now.
And this little statement, let your grace your speech always be with grace as though seasoned with salt. Right. I think about, if you give me a piece of meat or a steak or something and it's just bland, I may eat a bite or two of it, but I don't really want it. It's not good. But there's something about salt. It has just the right amount of salt, man. I want another bite and another bite and another bite. So there's something about the grace of God in me, the grace of God coming through my lips that seasons our speech in such a way that it makes people thirsty and they want something more. And what if, Kyle, even out of today, that all our listeners today would say, you know what, I'm going to start praying. Think about this. I'm going to start praying every day this week for these 5 things for me. Right. I'm also going to start praying. I'm going to let it be a little pattern of prayer for every believer that I know that I pray for. Yeah. That God would open doors, give them bold speech, clear speech, wise conduct, and gracious speech. And I'm going to pray for our whole church. Yep. That these things. And then what if all of a sudden God starts opening doors and everybody has bold speech and everybody has clearly is proclaiming the gospel and they're conducting themselves wisely, making the most of every opportunity. And the grace of God is creating this hunger and thirst in lost people. I think it would lead to the same kind of results. That's right. That Paul saw through his witness.
Catalytic. I'm thinking as of just the level of crosshairs here for pastors, spiritual leaders, ministers there, like actionable steps here. Like I have some things we're praying, 21 days of prayer and fasting in the season we're in, that I'm going to pray. I'm going to add this to praying for them, that our people would have that I would, that they would, and I would encourage any of our listeners, man, that these things, this is not about information transfer, like let's take these things into God's presence and pray for them. And even now, Bill, would you lead us to pray through these 5 things?
Yeah, I will. Let's pray together wherever you are right now. Just enter into prayer. I'm going to lead us, but I want to encourage you to turn your eyes to the throne of God and say, Lord, would you open up doors of opportunity for me to share the gospel? Just pray that. Secondly, would you give me bold speech? Just give me bold speech. That nothing would deter me, nothing would hold me back. And then would you pray this prayer? Lord, would you give me clarity about the mystery of the gospel? That I understand it, I see it, and then that I can articulate it in spirit, combining spiritual thoughts with spiritual words, like Paul says in 1 Corinthians 2. Lord, give me spiritual understanding and spiritual words to have clear speech for the gospel. And then here's a fourth thing. Lord, give me wise conduct around every unbeliever that I encounter. Help me to see them, to be aware, to be in the moment, that I'm really aware of the spiritual dynamic that's going on, of the potential for the gospel. And then when you open the door, let me make the most of the opportunity. So Lord, give me wise conduct. And then finally, Lord, would you give me gracious speech? Let my words be, as it were, seasoned with salt that creates that beautiful thirst and hunger in those who are far from God, and just keeps them coming back. It draws them in, not by the beauty of my words, Lord, but by the grace that's coming through me. And your grace, Lord, it's, as Ephesians 4:28 says, words that give grace to those who hear. It gives that enabling power, gives that spiritual hunger and desire to do what God wants them to do. And Father, I pray that you'd help us learn how to pray this way. This is just a very practical way for us to pray for a bolder church, a bolder witness, a greater harvest, a greater advancement of your kingdom. So use us, Lord, in this way, we pray. In your name, amen.
Amen. Well, man, I think that is truth to be applied. So I'd encourage all of our listeners, man, take some notes there, write those 5 things out. And hey, as always, man, I love when God's teaching me something to reteach it. So find somebody to share it with, share this podcast with, pass it on, because on the other side of these prayers are people.
That's right.
People that need Jesus. And so think about, Paul prayed this so that for the sake of other people to hear the good news. Aren't we glad that Paul prayed it? So we love you, our listeners. Thank you for the chance to be with you again today. And we look forward to next week as we continue this series of prayers that change the world.